Hello guys, I'm your host Griffin, and today's topic is, those of you who have had an affair with a university professor or lecturer, what's your story? How did it happen and how did it end? Please consider subscribing if you enjoy the video. Not quite the same, but I once had a student ask me to get dinner at the college cafeteria with them. It was hella awkward, and I didn't know what to say, so I said no thanks. I'm not on the meal plan. Not me, but my dad told me that he had an affair with his literature professor. They ended up running away to Arizona together and living there for like a month before my dad realized this was a huge mistake and came back. Not me. But a very cringy story I witnessed firsthand. In my master's program there was one younger male professor, early 30s, and known to hang around his female students a bit too much. But he wasn't the only one of those we had. At my university, each grad program sort of has their bar, where the students hang out sometimes after classes together. Ours was an Irish pub on the edge of downtown. One Thursday after class, a bunch of us went to the pub together, and as we walked in we spotted this professor at the bar, holding hands and making eyes at another female student from our master's program. One of the other guys in my group waved to them, and they were clearly shocked to see us all. A couple minutes later, they left together. The real shocker to us in this wasn't the professor, but the student. The woman he was with was his own age, but married with 3 kids. She avoided us after that as much as possible, so no idea what happened there in the end, but ouch. This is like really unspectacular. We met at the party of a mutual friend and got along fabulously, so we started to hang out. Later when the semester started, I was initially put in one of his classes, but I switched with someone so it wouldn't be weird. It ended by just fizzling out over time. We're still friendly and see each other occasionally. It just wasn't the big love for either of us. I was working at a bar to put myself through college and life and was living the female bartender life. Group of guys comes in 15 minutes before close. One of them is super cute. We start flirting, and we spend the night together. Woke up the next morning, made reintroductions, ask what do you do, etc. I tell him I'm pre-law and I'm nervous about a particular class because I'd taken time off and it's my first quarter back in a bit, and this class has a highly respected female professor and I'm wondering if I've bitten off more than I can chew. He then tells me he's in law school and working as a teacher assistant for a female professor. Somewhere in the back of my head something starts tingling. I ask him what class he's TAing for, and that's when I found out I had just met and slept with my philosophy of law TA, and he was still in my bed, naked. There were only 2 people in the class who had to have their work graded by the actual professor of the class, and I got straight A's. I never went through law school, but he did, and he's now a successful prosecutor. We hooked up occasionally after that, but it never went anywhere formal. We just still run into each other and we always say hi. My sister, they are now married and have a newborn. She's always had a thing for teachers. I tease her a lot. A friend of mine had a fling with a criminal law professor of ours. He was married, I believe. It didn't last. He was a chain smoker who dressed in 80s suits, but his lectures were fascinating. I guess that's why she liked him. A friend of mine had always fancied this one particular teacher who was, I think, early 30s. He was living with his fiancée at the time. My friend gave him a letter expressing her feelings for him on the last day of school. We were 18 then. To everyone's surprise, the feelings were reciprocated. They began a relationship and no one got into any trouble because she was no longer a student at the school. Fast forward to a few weeks later and someone who had been to school with us found out about the relationship and told her mum, who was a school governor. The governor kicked off. The teacher was fired. My friend deleted 99% of her friends off Facebook and moved away. They're still together 7 years later, married with a kid, and he still teaches. Happy ending, really. University assistant here. No affair happened. I sometimes get coffee invitations from my students. I always stay away and I don't know if I could ever see them as real human beings able to date. We dated for 6 months. I fell in love. She got bored. 2 of my current older professors are married, and I thought it was cute. I learned he has been a professor for a really long time. So long that she was once his student. I guess they hit it off because now they're both working at the school where they met and are retiring soon. I met him socially, at a friend's party. We dated briefly, but I couldn't get past the age difference. 10 years / differences in life stages. It boggled my mind that he had had an entire life. Married, divorced, career change, and mine was just beginning. Plus, he wanted a serious relationship that would lead to marriage. I wanted to experience everything, everyone, that was out there before nesting up. Worked out great. We're still friends today. He's married, actually, to a casual friend of mine, great girl, and I partnered up, oddly enough, with a guy 10 years my senior. This is probably bad, but I was in high school, and he was a TA for my theater director. He had been a theater kid at my high school. He was 23 at the time. I was 17, and was still friends with kids in the grades below him, and came to help out after struggling to find work. We were dating for about 3 months before he got fired, on suspicion of having an inappropriate relationship with another student. Red flag. And we continued dating for nearly a year after I had turned 18, graduated high school, and started college. I dumped him around the time I turned 19 after I realized how screwed up the whole thing was, and he started dating another 17-year-old and married her the day after her high school graduation. They got divorced a year later after she also woke up. Oof. Here's one I can answer. For reference, this happened in the US. Class was a small, 200 level seminar my first semester of college. I was 18. He was 30. Being perfectly blunt here, he wasn't a knockout or anything and was objectively only mildly attractive, but he was a really talented and caring professor with kick-ass lectures. Dude was freaking hilarious, and it was everyone's favorite class, so just about every female student in that seminar had a giant crush on him by the end of the semester. The class met once a week for 3 hours in the evening, and a group of us started going to the bar/restaurant on campus after class for dinner. After a couple weeks and some prodding, he started joining us. He would buy the underage students drinks, we'd play Never Have I Ever, and the conversation got sexual more than a couple of times. I could tell he was attracted to me, and I kind of enjoyed the power I felt from getting someone in charge to do something they weren't supposed to do and think things they weren't supposed to think. The sexual tension escalated, and after the semester ended, a student threw a linguistics party for the group who would go to the restaurant after class. He ended up coming. Everyone in attendance was drunk as shit, and I was sitting next to him on the couch when I decided to just go for it and grab his hand. To my absolute shock, he didn't move my hand away. We ended up making out in the bathroom, and he took me out to dinner the following night. We dated for 3 years. It was an unhappy relationship. I spent our time together feeling neglected and more like a trophy than a partner. He constantly acted like spending time with me was a chore or a favor he was doing for me, and he wasn't willing to move in with me or offer any kind of meaningful commitment. So I left him. My feelings about the entire thing are pretty mixed. I'll be 26 soon, and as someone who now works in academia with some teaching experience, the boundary transgressions he committed were horrifying, and I do feel like the entire thing constituted an abuse of power. But having gotten to know him at least somewhat well, he's honestly a decent person with solid morals and values. He just has a ton of emotional baggage and is in a lot of pain. We remain in occasional contact, and as far as I know, he's still in the field and hasn't dated anyone since we broke up. I used to teach between the age of 23-26, college-level advertising classes. I had several students ask me out and I always had to sweetly direct their attention to academics so that they just thought that I did not hear/understand. My classes were very informal and I always let it slip that I had a very serious boyfriend. The most heartbreaking one was this overweight kid who was super popular among his classmates, but I knew he hadn't had much success in love. I also knew that he had a crush on me. He would stay back after class every time to ask a question which would then give way to friendly conversation. Usually it would be about me telling him about my time spent studying abroad. When he finally asked me out, it was very clear. No way to divert. I just told him that it wasn't the best situation seeing that I was his professor and engaged. Good part though is that the kid kept in touch with, lost a whole bunch of weight, went to Europe to study and specialize in his craft and is now a super successful business person. I have moved countries since then and he visited me last year and it was amazing to see the transformation in him. Not me, but my parents. My dad was my mom's professor in college. He never made a move or did anything while she was a student. The day after graduation he called her up and asked her out. On their first date they stayed up all night building model rockets and launched them at dawn. They've been married for 35 years and have me and my brother. Back in the late 60s, my mom was a college student taking an English class. My dad was a young professor. They have now been married 50 years this December, and my dad did not end up teaching at the college level after all. The first day of intro to psych I was just disgusted by my instructor, grad student TA. But then one night a few weeks into the semester we bumped into each other at a polling station, 1992 presidential election, and started chatting. Chatting led to more and eventually we were in a full-blown relationship despite a 15-year age difference. Skipping many details, but we ended up getting married, and when he graduated he got a job as a professor at a very small religious university many states away. We moved and I was able to get a position at the same university, and everything was great until I, and the entire campus, since there were fewer than 1,000 total students, found out that he had begun a relationship with, surprise, an 18-year-old in his intro to psych class. Apparently he had a type, and it was naive young girls whom he was in a position of authority over. We divorced and I moved far away, and perhaps in a measure of karma he was fired within a year after repeated warnings by administration to stop screwing his students. Had a TA in one of my classes that friended me on Facebook before the class had even started. It was weird, but once I met him in class, he seemed nice. He was 31 and I was 20. He wasn't attractive, but had a good personality. I thought. We dated a couple months and it was awful. Looking back, he used me as a trophy to parade in front of his ex-wife, emotionally abused me, lied, threw a glass bottle at me after a fight, and had sex with me when I was medicated and loopy after having my wisdom teeth pulled. He raped me after we broke up by insisting I come back over and talk about what went wrong. Then he harassed me after and wouldn't leave me alone, even having his that were 4 and 6 leave messages on my phone. I regret ever agreeing to go out with him. I didn't even really want to date him, initially. Not me, but a friend of a friend. She went after her male TA, teacher's assistant, in university, who was a PhD student in her program. They dated for a couple years, had a very tumultuous relationship, moved in together to try to save it, and then broke up very dramatically. She now has a girlfriend she loves and lives with and has told everyone she was gay all along. I've known her for 10 years and she's a super funny and calm human. I can't imagine her ever getting in screaming matches in her apartment and tossing somebody's clothes out the window. I was studying voice and an adjunct professor covered for my training professor while he was on traveling abroad. The adjunct professor was extremely charismatic, shared phenomenal stories of playing with the most respected names in the industry, well-traveled, had a voice so low it shook our bellies to listen, was dark, handsome and in his 30s. It started with a group of friends who would stay after class and discuss theory, philosophy and music history. Over the weeks the group got smaller until it was just me and the adjunct professor. Chats turned to coffee, coffee turned to dinner, dinner turned to late night walks around the lake. We dated secretly for 2 years. I ended up quitting school when he got his tenure so he wouldn't lose his job. He proposed, I accepted. Year 4 he started getting violent. We tried therapy. He'd cry and promise to stop, then explode and do it again. His abuse continued. It became toxic. 5 years in, I packed my things and left him. I never married him. I got out. I survived. He begged me to stay. Months later he begged me to come back. Years later he married another student. She looks so much like me it's mesmerizing. Awkward. I sometimes imagine she's another version of me. The one who didn't escape. The unhappy. The beaten. Since then I've moved to another country. Married 8 years now to a kind, gentle, brilliant man who is a true partner. Also, an academic, probably be a professor after his doctoral studies. I like to think I'm the best version of me, living my best life, taking the best of every hard-learned lesson, the happy version, the safe and supported version, the survivor. My brother married his speech teacher from junior college, married 20 years, recently divorced. They both had changed as people. He's much happier now and she's a bitter 40-year-old who looks 80 because of her bitterness. Please subscribe if you like the video. It really helps the channel to grow. Adios.